You're listening to this week's episode of the Vacation Rental Business in Today's World podcast. You're about to start transforming your business and life with the information found here. We interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in the vacation short-term rental industry and supporting businesses. The information found here is a combination of brain science, transformational thinking, safety and loss prevention, and vacation short-term rental knowledge and experiences, all rolled into one to help you and your business to achieve levels you never thought possible. I am glad you are here, and now please welcome your host, Eric Thibodeau.
All right. Hello, everyone. We're back again. And today I'm speaking with Larry Green. Larry is a safety professional. And Larry, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks, Eric.
Great. And where are you at today?
Greater Fulshear, Texas.
In Fulshear, Texas. Great.
Yeah.
Great day to be in Texas.
It is a great day to be in Texas. Always a great day to be in Texas.
That's right. And so I'm in Friendswood, Texas at home. We were at the beach last week, kind of doing some Hurricane Sally repairs, and got one beach house still working to get back up and working in our business there, and brought a new property online. So we've been busy for sure.
Good to hear.
Yeah. So appreciate you coming in, sharing some of your wisdom with around safety. And Larry's also a vacation rental owner. And but tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, Eric. So as you know, been in the safety profession probably 40 years now, if you added it all up together. The first 35 years worked for DuPont, retired there as a global safety manager, and then immediately went to work for BP. Worked for BP as an operational safety authority for about 7.5 years, and just recently retired in October. So getting used to that. Plan to do some consulting. I'm also a fellow at the Energy Institute, based out of London. So looking forward to helping them with some projects as well. So a lot of background in safety, a lot of background in operations. Worked in a lot of different chemical plants and things like that along the time. But safety has always been a passion for me since day one. I've got an education in safety. I'm a certified safety professional, but also have just a lot of interest in vacation rentals as well. So, we own a property. We'll get into that a little more in detail, but we own a property up in Colorado. And many years ago, owned a property actually down in the beach in Texas. So kind of both extremes.
Yeah, so you've got great experience in safety for sure. We've worked together, and then we just want to hear about some more about your vacation rental and how these two things mesh up, and why safety is so important. I know it's more than just some transaction, for you and I. It's our passion, our life.
Exactly.
What we do to help people return to work, or in some cases now we're talking about our guests. Guests have a great experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us about your current vacation rental up in Colorado.
Yeah. So we, I guess in 2012, we just a little bit of a quick story there. Kind of leads into some other things, but my wife is a nurse practitioner. So she was working for a doctor who had a place in Colorado. And, he said, you guys need to go up and just spend a week. It's this beautiful area up in the mountains. It was during the fall, which with the aspens were just gorgeous. And so we went up there and just fell in love with the area. And we had, like I said, in years before, we had a vacation rental property on the beach, and had invested in that and sold it, and we're looking for another opportunity to invest. And we just fell in love with the area. So we purchased a log cabin up in the San Juan Mountains, about 9,000 elevation, in a small town there. So we have, it's been both a personal enjoyment, but also it's been a good business for us as well. So, but lots of opportunities, right? So, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get into that aspect. But yeah, so mountain, area, log cabin, primarily a summer rental, if you will. It's not really a wintertime place where you can go and ski. It's more of an outdoorsy, ATVs, jeeping, fly fishing, hiking, that kind of thing. So we really love it. Yeah.
Yeah, outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so vacation rentals, I found basically most people are just, they happened into them. It just wasn't say, I'm going to go be a vacation rental owner or manager. It just happened.
Exactly.
Same
Exactly.
for you, right? Someone mentioned it to you and you just jumped in.
Yeah. So it's as you know, and as others know that may be listening, it's a twofold thing for you, right? It's a business. It can generate revenue, but in reality, it's it helps uh, you pay for it, right? So in our case, when we were young, we may not have been able to afford to have multiple homes. So to have a vacation rental property and have a second home, if you will, it was good to be able to rent it out and help pay for the investment, right? So that's another sort of aspect of, I think, the reason some people get into vacation rental. It's twofold. It makes you money, but it also helps pay for your investment. And as we all know, property, particularly vacation rental property, is just a really good investment. It hardly ever depreciates. It always goes up in value.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we love them and we own quite a lot of real estate ourselves.
Yeah.
So as we go into safety, something you and I care quite deeply about. It's been our whole careers working there. But we hear discussions about being proactive in safety and loss prevention. How would
Mhm.
you describe this?
Well, proactive, by definition, means that you're doing something before something happens, right? So in safety, what's so critically important with being proactive is, for example, you don't want someone to be injured and then try to figure out how they got injured, right? So simply put, you want to try to avoid the injury, being proactive in your processes and your things and training and teaching. So proactive is just a simple way of saying, I'm going to do the things that need to be done before it's a reactive situation. And I think injuries in loss prevention, it's just like keeping your car, keeping your tires in your car inflated, right? So if you just run your car, for 100,000 miles and never do anything to the tires, guess what? It will force you to do something eventually. But we're pretty much proactive when it comes to that, right? We change our tires, we change our oil. It's all preventative because you just don't want to wait until your car breaks down or someone gets injured. So that's the way I've always looked at that, Barry.
Right. And our experiences and others are certainly sharing and knowing that, we don't like to do management by injury or management by loss. We know
Exactly.
things can happen, or maybe we don't know. And that's why people are here today to start learning a little bit more about that. But that we don't want to manage by loss or injury. We want to manage proactively and prevent. But sometimes prevention is really hard to measure. How do I know that prevention is really working?
Yeah. So a great question, a great comment. One of the, and Eric, you and I know this firsthand, is one of the challenges in our profession is trying to convince or to make a case to do something proactively, right? So you're saying if we invest, we do these things, we will therefore prevent loss, prevent injury. So the challenge is doing those things that make sense, but it also has to make sense to other people, right? Because you're making investments and you're spending time. And if someone doesn't understand the basis for what you're trying to do, they may just see it as a frivolous spending and time commitment of people that's not necessary. So the being proactive, it has to be visible, but it has to be understandable to those that are the recipients of it. We know from those who are trying to be proactive, it makes sense to do that. But so I think that's where education and awareness really communication, you can't do enough of that with people just to understand why you do the things you do and what's the result of what you're trying to prevent.
And one of the things that's great, and one of the things I've been thinking about is we've been, working. I've been on this journey here in vacation rentals and safety. Is just thinking about, someone said, hey, if you can figure out how to get people to know that safety is a revenue generator, and so I've thought about it and said it's really hard to always generate revenue from safety because it's a value discussion. But I
Exactly.
like to think it of as not only just a value discussion because we value our guests and we value our workers that are working there and our family that's there. But also thinking about it as a revenue protector. So sometimes we're not generating revenue when we do safety, but we certainly are protecting our revenue. An example
Exactly.
is, if I'm removing trip hazards, then I'm not going to have an injury. I'm not going to have a lawsuit.
Hmm.
So sometimes we're protecting our revenue, not always generating revenue. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So an interesting way to think about that in terms of vacation rental, let's say. So as the saying goes, those of us in this business, we say with good safety is good production, right? So if you're give an example, if you're working in an operation somewhere, and if that operation is safe, 99% of the time, that is also a place where things run well, right? People are generally happy about their work, and the place generates revenue, right? So it's with safety comes revenue because you're not spending time and effort and dollars in this case trying to go back and do something reactively to try to prevent injury or property loss. So when you look at vacation rental, for example, how does that apply? And I'll give you my own examples of our property in Colorado, for example. So when I look at loss prevention and safety in Colorado, the first thing that comes to mind is most people that go to Colorado, since it's in close proximity to Texas, which is flat, right? They don't understand the hazards associated with being at high altitude. So things like altitude sickness, you have to educate and have things available for people to understand that. Because what you don't want to happen is for someone to get ill and say, well, I didn't understand that was a problem. Uh, there's fall hazards, right? The beauty of being outside in the wilderness is it is a wilderness. And that's the greatness of it. But it's also risky and it's hazardous if you don't pay attention, if you don't have the right kind of clothing or hiking shoes. And it's not really, in most places there's not barricades and fall protection, things like that. You're out in the elements. So you have to educate and help people be aware. And then there's animals, right? There's bears, there's elk, there's moose, there's all these things that are there that are beautiful to see, but they're still wild animals. So the point I'm trying to make is loss prevention can also be location specific, right? So not only are you talking about the property that people are staying in, but what are the activities that they're going to be doing? Because even though there may not be quote unquote liability associated with what someone does outside of your cabin, the last thing you want to do is for someone to be injured while they're on vacation, enjoying your property, right? I mean, the whole idea of that is to people to go have a great time, be with their family and their friends or whatever, and experience vacation, right? So the last thing you want to do is then have to worry about somebody being injured because they just didn't understand. So when you look at your property, to me, one of the things we like to do, my wife and I, is to look at what are the hazards people are exposed to that they may not understand. Not unlike training someone to be safe in an operation, right? In a chemical plant or a refinery, wherever that may be. You have to educate and help people be aware. So we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort communicating. So I would, one of the things that we do is just something to think about. Even though we may have a on-site property manager, right, because it's at a distance, we always communicate. No one will be accepted as a renter without having a conversation with either myself or my wife. And it's not that we're being so wanting to know everything they're trying to do, but we want them to understand that it's where they're going, are they familiar, that kind of thing. And that's that part. Well, the second part, I think, of loss prevention, particularly when you look at your property. So to me, a good, well-kept property where the maintenance is done, there's no algae, there's no this, there's no that, there's no things in the yard that kids can trip on or step on. So it's all about loss prevention from the standpoint of, what does your property look like? Is it well maintained? Do you think about safety when you go and view your property? We try to go and spend a week, if we can, at least twice a year, just primarily repairing and looking and making sure that things are top notch, because that's where I think, Eric, you mentioned, how does safety equate to revenue? Well, one way that it does is a safe property is a well-maintained property, and people remember that. And when you get your ratings and you get your feedback, what people say is, it's a quality place. Everything worked well. Everything was clean, everything, that kind of thing. I think that in itself generates additional revenue. At least it has for us, because we do a lot of, word of mouth ratings and things like that. So just, I'll stop there. But I think that if you look at your property and you just ask yourself, if I've never set foot in this house or this cabin or this condo before, what are the things that would concern me about someone getting hurt accidentally, right? And then just like stairways, we make sure that we put carpet strips on our stairways. They're all wood, right? So they can be, you don't want anyone to slip, so that kind of thing just goes on, and every house is different. But I think, I'll stop there, but I think that's just a way to consider how you evaluate safety and loss prevention when it comes to your vacation rental, both property as well as environment.
That's well said, Larry. I think, what I take from that is, we talked about why. Our why is because it's a passion. We care about our guests. We care about our property.
Exactly.
So that's the what. The why. The what is basically, what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Which you talked about, and how do you do the education? And then the how. The how is, I'm going to go out and make repairs. I'm going to call a contractor to take care of issues, and I'm going to remove as many hazards as I can or mitigate them. And so when we do the why, the what, and the how, there's safety and revenue or an conversation. They're not inseparable.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the really beauty of this for us. And I want the audience to continue to think about this particular topic, and that's how we should see them.
Exactly. And I can give you a quick example of the other side of that coin, right? So being familiar with vacation rental property and safety, recently, my wife and I rented a small cabin out in West Texas just to get away and, celebrate Thanksgiving there. If we looked on the internet, right, and we looked at photos and we looked at, man, it was phenomenal. It was perfect for us. So we signed up, we rented it, and we drove, and we got there, and it was a complete disaster, right? There were safety hazards. It wasn't clean. It wasn't well maintained. It just, it had a strong odor of insecticide. I mean, it's just all these things that you go, and we kept looking at ourselves as renters and property owners. Man, this would be embarrassing. I wonder if the owner even knows the state of condition of the property. So to me, that just, I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, that's just a real live example of how being connected with your property, being connected with your property managers, talking to your renters, looking at your property, putting your eyes on it. I mean, that's absolutely critical. I mean, that's just critical common sense that if you've got such a large investment in something like that, you should be making sure that you spend time looking at it.
Exactly. It's a good example. And so what are some of the protective measures you've taken at your vacation rental property in Colorado?
Yeah, so one of the things I always make sure is because we're located in an altitude and the terrain is not flat like West Texas, right? It's mountainous. There's short drop offs and things like that. So on our particular property, I always make sure that things are picked up, that there's not any limbs or things like that in the yard, right? It's just a simple thing. I don't want someone to, particularly a child, playing out there to be injured. I always make sure that any equipment, grills, patio furniture that moves around, all that kind of things like that, that they're in top-notch shape, they're clean, there's no leaks, there's no fire hazards, any of that. So anything that they're cooking with, right? Because that's a fire hazard, right? A fire in the mountains of Colorado is not a good thing. Anywhere it's not, but especially there. So we protect all of that. We make sure that everything's in working order, appliances, fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, all that gets checked. Everything is done. No tripping hazards in the house. We make sure, like I said, that that there's no slipping hazards as well. And then checking just the structure of the house, right? If you have a patio, if you have a surround deck, what are the banisters? The banisters in good shape, right? In our business, it's called a handrail, but in layman terms, it's a banister and it's a guardrail there, and you want to make sure that works, because the last thing you want is for someone to lean on that and they fall, right? So that's just a few things. I mean, it's mainly, as I said, even if you have no safety training, you're really going into your property with the mindset, what are the things that could hurt someone? And if you see something, guess what? You fix it.
You fix it.
And no questions asked. And you spend the money and you make it work. And I think what happens is people see that it's sturdy, it's well built, it's safe. I feel comfortable here, and everything works and it's clean.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, and next part is, let's just take the handrail or the banister, and let's say you notice it was loose, but you said, you know what, I'm just going to fix it next time, and maybe it's $100 repair. And, after you leave, people come in and they're going up the handrails, go upstairs, and the banister comes off, and someone gets injured.
Yes.
Right. And you say, okay, well, that really, of course, not acceptable, but right. So we took $100 type repair, said, hey, we're going to wait and do this later. And we went from something that was generating revenue, and basically now we're liable for more.
Exactly.
And we could have spent that $100, and I call it like revenue protection. First of all, I value, like you, safety, and I don't want anybody hurt. And I don't think anybody really wants to have anybody hurt in their property, but we have to take action. We can't let safety issues, knowing or unknowing, that's why we're having some of these discussions to say, let's get engaged. Let's understand what hazards are and how we can correct them.
Absolutely. And that's very well said. That's a good example, because you can always find things that are just not quite big safety issues. They're just sort of in between, right? And I think a banister handrail is a good example. It's loose. I lean on it good. It's not going to, come loose or anything like that, but it's still not tight, right? So you can convince yourself, if you're not careful, that we'll get it next time. But I think that, and I know that's what this is all about, is that your property owners, folks like ourselves, we cannot let ourselves get into that mindset, because the downside of that, I'll give you an example. I won't say where, but I read something not too long ago where there was a property where on that particular property, the vacation rental property, the person had installed a hammock in between two trees, right, for their customers to use. Sound like a nice thing, shady area and all that. But one of the things they apparently didn't think to look at was the tree had some limbs that were rotten, right? And one of those limbs fell and hit a person and injured them.
Yeah.
And you think, well, how can you get your head around those sort of things? And again, you have to say, okay, if I'm in this hammock, what's around me? 365 degrees, what's around me that could injure someone? And if it's a loose limb or that kind of thing, well, then you take care of it. But that's a those are real live examples, and those things happen, unfortunately. But as property owners, you just have to put yourself in the mindset that I absolutely never ever is it acceptable for someone to be injured. Number one, and number two, how do I prevent that?
Right, and I agree. I mean, in this case with the hammock, you got two choices, right? You can say, okay, this would be really nice, but if there's an injury, I can't have it, so I'm not going to do it. Or I could make an evaluation, and can I get the risk to an acceptable level? It just
Yes,
depends where you are in your business and what you're willing to do or accept. Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
your
Yeah,
thought-
we like in our cabin, for example, and there's something else to think about. I think the point there is that sometimes you do things that may actually prevent someone from renting. And I'll give you an example. Like I said, we're up in 9,000 feet elevation in the middle of the forest. Fires in Colorado are notoriously catastrophic. So we don't allow any outdoor fires, period. That's, it's our business, it's our home, and we say no. Well, there's been a lot of people who, because we won't allow an outdoor fire to do s'mores or whatever, they choose a different property. But that's okay to me. That's okay to me because I don't want to be, and I don't want someone to be that person who inadvertently, accidentally starts a forest fire. So we just don't allow it. So there's also that kind of thing, and maybe we don't allow certain things that some people do, but it's still safety, prevention, protection, and those are the lines in the sand that you have to say that as a owner of the property, that's the line in the sand. We're not going to ever cross over that. And if it costs business, that's fine. But the downside of that is you have a forest fire and you burn up your property and 20 others, then there is no revenue generation, right?
Yeah, there's no revenue generation. There's exactly. So it's
Exactly.
a great example. So we need to do more by more than just identifying and eliminating hazards. We need to have a process to do this regularly. What's an example we can use in our vacation rental business to do some type of assessment? So we know why we want to do it. We know what we have to do. Now, how do we get about the how of how we're going to do it?
So I think a couple of things, Eric. First one is, as I mentioned earlier, go to your property, right? Make sure you put your eye on your property and do that at least once a year. We try to do it twice a year. It's been our procedure, if you will, our protocol for a number of years. And so put your focus on your property. Look at it, make sure that it's safe, make sure it's what you want it to be. But also, if you have a property that is a ways away from where you live, for example, our property is, 1,200 miles from our home. I'm not going to jump in my car and run up for the weekend. So I think it's a good thing to have someone locally that's plugged in, right? It doesn't have to be a property manager, even though I think that's a great idea. But I'm just saying, generally as a concept, make sure you have a local person who has access to your property that can check on it periodically. Excuse me, and I think that's absolutely critical. I just believe that.
We do maintenance checks, or basically preventive maintenance checks, and some of those include safety items every month on our properties.
Absolutely.
We're not always there either, so we have someone do that. But having a checklist and an assessment list is a good idea.
That's great. That's a great. Mhm.
So as we get close to wrapping up, what's one of your big goals for your property or just you in general for 2021?
Yes, that's a great question. So, first of all, we're going to maintain the way we have done things because it seems to work good for us. But one interesting dynamic that's happened, and I don't know if it's this way on the coast, beachfront property, but when COVID hit the world, um, initially we had a few people who called and said, we can't come. It was either due to concern of illness or, in a lot of cases, it's just people that lost their jobs. They just didn't have the discretionary income to spend to take a vacation. So, uh, but what really happened, which I thought was pretty phenomenal, we had people who have come to the mountains for vacation who had never done that before. And they basically said, we were looking for a place remotely located away from exposures in their mind. So we ended up having to turn people away over and over and over. Just wasn't any vacancies.
Right.
So I think for 2021, to me, at least in the mountains, maybe you can speak to the beach, we've seen just people, it's kind of like if you've read about those who have invested in recreational vehicles, it's just a way to go. I'm not in a hotel. It's someone's home. I know it's thoroughly cleaned. And the clientele that go there are people that stay in the home. It's not anybody else coming in and out. So I think the challenge for 2021 for us is that we're going to have more than likely a lot of first time renters, right? There's two kinds of renters, right? There's those that's never been before, and then there's your repeat renters. And the way you address those are completely different. We've had folks who have come and rented our property for the last 8 years, every year. Well, the education process is different. It's mainly what are some of the new things, maybe regulations around OHVs or that kind of thing. But someone who's never set foot in the mountains who want to go stay in a log cabin, I think we're going to have more clients that way. So I think that's to sort of a roundabout way of answering your question. I think the challenge for 2021 is I think we're going to have a lot of first time renters, and we're going to have to make sure that our communications, our documentation, that everything is in place to make sure that their stay is good for them and there's no safety issues related to that.
Yeah, we experienced that in as we moved in through 2020, and a lot of new people that have never been to a vacation rental. The
Yeah.
houses seem to be more desired, and
Mhm.
so I agree with you. And I think 2021 will be the same. People will want to travel, they want to go out and do different things, and they realize, hey, life is short. Let's
Yeah,
take the family and go do something we haven't done before.
exactly.
Education process of is critical for new or repeat guests. So that's a good point.
Agree.
Yeah. So Larry, I appreciate you coming on today. Is there anything else we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
No, I think all those are good points. Eric, I appreciate you letting me take an opportunity to share. Being you and I are in unique positions. We do safety for a living, and we have vacation rentals that we do. And when we connect those together, and I think what you're doing is phenomenal. I think that there's such a need um, for people to consider and look and learn about how to set up your property to be the safest that it can, because that's always going to equate to someone going and having a good time and nothing happening, right? That's what you want. You want it to be fun and enjoyable, but you want it to be a non-event when it comes to health and safety. And I think what you're doing is a big need. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to it.
Well, Larry, thanks a bunch. I appreciate your great experience and wisdom and sharing about your vacation rental. and wish you well and a good 2021 for you and your wife, as well as your vacation rental. I appreciate it.
Same to you, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Safer VR's podcast with Eric Thibodeau. If you enjoy this, I would love you to join my Facebook group, The Safer Vacation Rentals, for more of the same. You can also join our email list at www.safervrs.com.